for a ride today. Haven't been doing a daily vlog. Kind of been getting complacent on that. But today we're filming GoPro 9 2.7K, 60 frames a second, probably export to 30 frames a second. And let's get to it. So I've been thinking about crank lengths, and right now I'm riding 172.5s, the traditional crank length for someone of my size, which is just shy of 5'11". I say 5'11" on a good day. And I have about, when taking a book and measuring my inseam, 83 to 84 centimeter inseam. My legs are a little short, but my femurs are long. So long femurs, I think, are good for longer cranks too. There's some information that AI gives that's actually inaccurate. I had to correct it, and it says, oh, with long femurs, because it's reading it from a Reddit post, your knee is going to come up high. I'm like, your knee's going to come up higher from longer tibias, from the lower part of the leg. It's like, oh yeah, you're exactly correct. But that it keeps spitting out because someone on Reddit didn't know what they were talking about. Shocker. And just spread some misconceptions. Longer femurs, you do have to put your saddle back, but doesn't mean your lower part of your leg, or at the top of the stroke. Think about it. The lever, the upper part of your leg is longer, the lower part is actually shorter, so it comes up less high. Anyways, so I always raced on 172.5s. I was looking at the tour and thinking about the trends, and now the trend is everyone needs to ride shorter cranks. But really, if you look about it, so given that nowadays the guys who are maybe dominating who are the shorter riders, you see, oh, we'll switch to 165. But if you look at like this last week, like Tom Pidcock is riding pretty well. He rides on 165s. But if you look at his saddle height and figure it out, for me, that's like a 174 crank. So as per his leg length, he's actually riding a little bit longer than I'm riding, proportionally. You know, the other guys, Tadej Pogacar, if you look at proportionally at my leg length, it's probably like 169, so essentially 170. So, you know, for me, 172 is around those lengths. And back in the day, it used to be longer cranks, but why? In the 90s, who dominated? Well, it was Miguel Indurain who dominated, but he was tall. And so he rode 180s, which were pretty much the largest production crank, and he rode 190s at the world hour record, but he was a big guy. But now the common bike fitters like to say, people on the internet like to say, there's a lot of people on the internet that love to say this, that even the tall guys are riding shorter cranks. And while it's true, some have, there are definitely some that tried it and went back, like Wout van Aert. He was trying the shorter crank thing, as far as I remember, like in February of last year. But then I'm pretty sure he went back to 172.5s. And there's even guys like today, like Jasper Philipsen. He won the sprint stage and he rides 172.5s. And he's only 5'9.5". So he's about an inch shorter than me, but still riding the 172.5s. Saying, but Tim, you're fat. You know, shorter cranks will give you more belly clearance, and that is true given a handlebar drop. But if you got a bit of a belly, what can you do? You can raise the handlebars, especially with adjustable stems nowadays. And I would argue that you probably shouldn't be focusing on lowering your CDA or way you cut through the, I think it's called CDA. Anyways, your aero profile. I would be arguing you should probably focus on losing weight. The other thing that these internet recommendations don't give you is some real facts. So if you're a heavier guy and you live in a hillier area like I do, that leverage does help. Even if you've got, I've got a 32 cog in my rear, and I think 39 up front, so it could go slightly lower, but I'm pretty low for a gear for a road bike. And I do notice the extra leverage up the hills. It's helpful. The other thing that affects me is, and a lot of times you hear, shorter cranks are better for your hips. I have some, it's not structural imbalance, it's like a functional imbalance, which is exacerbated by the shorter cranks. I'm almost sure of it now, because I definitely feel more right side saddle pressure. And I could notice that as I went down to a really short crank, like 152, that it started to really flare up. But I also noticed even on 175s, and I remember from my racing days when I went up in crank length, like 177.5, it actually kind of went away. Now I don't have those cranks anymore, and there is something to be said for maybe 172.5 is slightly shorter for me, maybe not as flexible. I can understand that, but just going off the deep end, going short isn't necessarily the best thing. The other thing is the crank length argument about foot speed. So, if you're doing a little higher cadence on shorter cranks, your foot speed may be the same, and people focus in on that, but I don't know that that's the entire thing. And there's a bike fitter in Australia that kind of mentioned this in one of his posts. But for a bigger guy, you're moving a lot more muscle around in the leg, so that can come into play, foot speed or no. If you have a higher cadence, you're going to be moving that muscle around more frequently. And I think, like, if you look back at the Armstrong years, Jan Ullrich never really got that high spin thing around. And proportionally, he was on shorter cranks than Armstrong was. But he was a bigger he had the big meaty legs. So that didn't really work for him. Now, for those people in the cycling forums that argue that 2.5 millimeters does not make a difference, I beg to differ. If you're highly tuned into your bike, you can feel the difference. Because it's at the top and the bottom of the stroke, I think the argument goes, oh, well, it's like the thickness of your cycling socks. Like, well, no. Your cycling socks shouldn't be that thick. But yeah, that's a thick cycling sock there. But even that doesn't really match the argument, because it's like at the bottom of the stroke, if you're 2.5 millimeters longer, all of a sudden those super thick cycling socks are going away and you're going into like negative land. So it's like you had 2 pair and you took them off. But then the top of the stroke would be 2 pair putting them on. That's your argument. So it does make a difference. And I think there is an argument that 172s, there is a place. I'm quite enjoying them today. as I'm out riding on the spin. Now on the Tour de France, I heard somewhere when they were talking about crank length that the average crank length is around 170, but there's two distinct groups. There's a bunch of guys, even some taller guys, that are going with the 165s, and then there's a bunch of traditionalists who are sticking with a 172.5. And there are some 170ers out there, even shorter guys that are 170ers. From what I'm hearing is that there are the two groups are the most popular, the 172.5 and the 165 group, which is interesting. So, and I want to say that probably the 172.5 group is more the sprinters, because you can get on top of a really big gear really quickly. So I would argue that maybe, now you could argue that you can spin faster on the 165s, but I think they have such big gears nowadays that you can really power and get on top of a big gear. Like, I don't know what the heck they're running, like 5510s or something, but or 5410s, you know, that's a huge gear. So the extra leverage will help you, you know, wind that up. So I'm gonna say probably the sprinters and are the guys that are more likely to be on the 172.5s. Arguing this online for the shorter cranks. Some guys from, I think Cat 1's probably from California, talking about, you know, the extra clearance through the corners. Yes, that is technically true. But again, I rode Cat 1, and I would, you know, at my local crit, I would kind of strike the pedal a little bit, but you kind of shave down the pedal so you kind of knew where you're at. I don't know. I'm not really buying that 100%, because again, you got some tour riders that are, I mean, you could argue that the US riders are better at crits, which is potentially a, you know, valid argument. But you know, there's some, you know, sprinters, right, on 172.5s of the tour. They still have to fly through corners. So yeah, I don't know about that. And I saw some really excellent criterium riders back in the day, you know, winning pro criterium championships, that kind of stuff, that were 175. So I don't think it held them back. I shouldn't just babble about crank length this entire ride. So maybe I should transition, maybe with a panorama or something. It's a pretty good panorama. So anyways, I've been working in some weightlifting. I think as of my last vlog, I was weightlifting quite frequently and doing some doubles. But then I started summer school, and I've brought down the weightlifting till about 2 times a week. I may up it to 3 for the last couple weeks of summer school. So I did do some weightlifting Tuesday morning right before work. So I stopped at a gym on the way there and did some work, a whole body exercise. I think tomorrow I'm going to motivate, get up early and do the same thing. Possibly have Duncan, because America runs on that after the weightlifting. And then just go from there. Oh, what I was going to say is I've been doing, yeah, the weightlifting, general body, and then the zone 1-2 stuff, which I'm hoping will just get me ready for, you know, better fall riding in Gonna get me ready for KOM season in the fall, and then transitioning into some winter sports that I do. Kind of got out of shape a bit this winter. Hopefully I will not do that this next winter, because I was making progress, and then winter came. I got a little tougher to train, and then pushed myself where I needed to go. Hey, the last few laps I kind of got silent from the vlog. Should be heading up about 15 miles today. We'll see.